Okay, today we're going to work on factoring and solving sums and differences of cubes, and we're going to start with factoring with perfect cubes, and then we'll solve at the end of the lesson. So there's rules that you've got to memorize in factoring perfect cubes. So I know this looks a little weird, just bear with me for a second. What you need to remember, this was always going to be the same sign. There's a blank here for a reason. This will always be the opposite sign. This will always be a plus. So let's talk about the differences. So we could have a sum of cubes, which would look like a to the third plus b to the third sum, meaning we're going to add. So to factor that, you're going to take the cube root of each term and we're going to keep that same sign. So the cube root of a to the third would be a. We would keep the sign of plus. The cube root of b to the third would be b. That creates our binomial. Now we're going to create our trinomial. So if you notice, you square the first term, so we would have a squared. This is where we want to take the opposite sign. So if we have plus here, we're going to have minus here, where it should always be opposite of your original. Then a times b, so we would multiply our two terms together, always a plus at the end, and then you want to square that last term to give you your b squared. If it's a difference of cubes, it would be a to the third minus b to the third, like this. So cube root of a to the third is a. We want to keep the same sign. Cube root of b to the third is b. Square your first term. Opposite sign this time. Multiply these two terms together. Always a plus. Square that last term. So this is the rules for factoring with perfect cubes. So now let's do some with numbers instead of all these variables. So our first example says factor 27x to the third plus 1. The first thing that I want you to do is take the cube root of each term. So in this case we have a sum of cubes. So if you want to kind of refer back up here to help you, you can. So we're going to create our binomial. So your binomial is created by taking the cube root of each term. So the cube root of 27, you're asking yourself what number times itself 3 times gives us 27. That's going to be 3. The cube root of x to the third is x. Remember, you keep the same sign first, and then the cube root of 1 will be 1. So you've created your binomial. So now to create your trinomial, we square the first term. So my first term is 3x. So when I square 3x, I'm going to get 9x squared. This is where we take the opposite sign. Then if you notice up here it says multiply a times b. So you're multiplying your two terms together. So 3x times 1 gives us 3x. Always a plus, and then if you look, we square our last term of the binomial, so 1 squared would give us 1. And that's the factored form. The other thing that we need to make note of is you're never going to be able to factor this trinomial. So when you're doing a sum or difference of cubes, you don't have to worry about, do I need to do AC with this? You're not going to be able to factor this. We could do quadratic formula, but that's not what it's asking us to do. So you'll never have to worry about, do I need to factor this any further? Okay, so next you have a your term with a difference of squares. If you want to pause the video, give it a try, and then come back to compare with my answers. So again, we're going to take the cube root of each term. So the cube root of x to the third is x. Keep the same sign. The cube root of 8 is 2. Now we're going to create that trinomial, so square the first, opposite sign. We want the product of our two terms, so x times 2 is 2x. Always a plus, square your last. So 2 squared gives us a 4. So hopefully you got the correct answer there. Now let's factor 1 with a GCF. So the GCF here is going to be 2x. So when we factor out 2x, we're going to get x to the third minus 27. Two terms, we can take the cube root of both, so this is a difference of cubes, so we have to keep going. What you have to remember here is that this 2x has to remain part of our final answer. So I'm going to drop that down so that it's waiting on me when I create my binomial, and then I'll create my trinomial. So let's just work on this difference of cubes first. So let's take the cube root of each term. So the cube root of x to the third is x. We want the same sign. Cube root of 27 is 3. To create the trinomial, square the first, opposite sign, okay? Multiply these two. That gives me 3x, always a plus, square the last, so 3 squared is 9. And then we just want to bring that down for our final answer. Because remember, when you're factoring, you should be able to multiply back to get what you started with. So 2x times x would be 2x squared times x squared would be 2x to the fourth. That's why we have to drop this down as part of our final answer. So here's another your turn. If you want to pause the video, try it, come back, compare it to my answer. It does have a GCF of 2. That will leave us x to the third plus 125. So I'm going to keep 2 as part of my answer. And then you're going to think about taking the cube root of each term. So the cube root of x to the third is x. We want to keep that same sign. I know this is a bigger number. If you don't know this right off the top of your head, the way you're going to do that in your calculator is you're going to hit math. You're going to go down to cube root. And we're going to put 125 in. And you see that your answer is 5. Then you're going to build your trinomial. Square the first would give us x squared. Opposite sign. Product of the two gives us 5x. Always a plus. 5 squared gives us 25 at the end. So this should have been your final answer, and hopefully you got that correct. Okay, so on to example 3. We have a sum of cubes here, and it's still the same process even though you've got two variables in this expression. So we're going to take the cube root of both pieces, both terms, okay? So when you take the cube root of variables, you're really dividing exponents. So 6 divided by 2 is going to give us x squared. So let's go up here and let's think about that. The cube root means something times itself 3 times. So if I had x squared times x squared times x squared, oops, put that in there. We would add exponents. So 2, 4, 6 to give us x to the 6th. So that's why it's x squared. So then y to the 9th, you're really going to do 9 divided by 3, so that would be y to the 3rd. Always the same sign. Cube root of 8 would be 2. So there's our binomial. So remember, to create your trinomial, we need to square this first term. So let's just bring that up here. And we're going to square it. So there's a difference now. This is power to power rule, so you need to multiply exponents. So this is going to equal x to the 4th, y to the 6th. Opposite sign. Now we need the product of these two, so that's going to give me 2x squared y to the 3rd. Always a plus, square your last term. So there's the factored form of example 3. You do have a your turn if you want to pause the video, and we'll come back and work this one together. So this is a difference of cubes on the short term. So the cube root of 64 is 4. Cube root of x to the third is x. Always the same sign. Cube root of 27 is 3, and the cube root of y to the third is y. So there's our binomial. Square your first term. So again, maybe it helps you to come to the side. You need to square each piece. So that's going to give you 16x squared. Opposite sign. We need the product of these two. So 4x times 3y is going to be 12xy. Always a plus. Square the last. So 3y squared, again, maybe the visual helps you. Square each piece. So that gives you 9y squared. Hopefully you got that one correct.